Yoriichi Tsugikuni is the strongest demon slayer in the history of the show and is the only one who had managed to overpower Muzan Kibutsuji with ease. Often appearing as a posthumous character, the man was born a child prodigy and a genius. Gifted with innate talent for swordsmanship and the ability to look through living beings when no one even knew what the transparent world was, he turned the world of demon slaying on its head as the creator of the sun-breathing style and subsequently several other main breathing styles. His esoteric technique was not something that could be emulated by just anyone. And yet, it found itself passed down through the Kamado family, ultimately leading to Tanjiro learning the art. The fact that his twin brother was the one to hold the position of upper rank 1 among Muzan's demons makes his character even more intriguing, especially when you consider that Michikatsu Tsugikuni would never have become Kokushibo had Yoriichi not been so freakishly strong. In today's video, we'll explore everything we can about the legendary demon slayer, starting from his unfortunate life to his unreal abilities that changed the game of demon slaying forever. The origins of Yoriichi. Believed to be cursed, proved to be blessed. Yoriichi was born as the Tsugikuni clan alongside his brother Michikatsu during the Sengoku period. Across several East Asian cultures, people believed that twins were a bad omen. A very strong example of this would be Maki and Mai Zenin from Jujutsu Kaisen. This superstition was particularly strong during the Sengoku period. Yoriichi was also born with an odd permanent mark on his forehead. Such a mark was considered to be a curse that took your life before the age of 25. Due to the unfortunate hand Yoriichi was dealt just for the sake of being born, his father wanted to kill him. However, their mother, Akino, was vehemently against her husband's decision to kill Yoriichi and was enraged by it. In the end, the couple agreed upon raising Yoriichi until he was 10, following which he would be sent to a temple to become a monk. Those 10 years were anything but comfortable for the boy, who was given poor education and nutrition in comparison to the rest of the family. He also grew up segregated from the Tsugikunis, living in a tiny room the size of 3 tatami mats. The harsh upbringing led to Yoriichi never speaking, and eventually the others began to believe that he was deaf. To counter the handicap, his mother gave him the trademark Hanafuda earrings, hoping that they would bless him with the ability to speak. There was a catch, however. The very mark that was considered to be a curse was actually a boon. It allowed Yoriichi to possess incredible physical prowess, as well as the ability to see through the bodies of living beings, which went on to be known as the Transparent World by demon slayers in the future, access to which made a demon slayer a lot more formidable, allowing them to take down ridiculously powerful demons. Yoriichi and Michikatsu's mother had an unnamed health issue which had rendered her much weaker. As Yoriichi could see through her mother's body in transparency, he would often cling to her left side, offering her physical support. However, everyone was unaware of Yoriichi's ability, and Michikatsu in particular believed that it was pathetic of his twin to stick to their mother so desperately. However, Michikatsu held no malicious intent towards Yoriichi and would often sneak out of his comparatively more lavish quarters to meet his brother. At one point, Michikatsu gifted him an untuned handmade flute to comfort him, which Yoriichi accepted wholeheartedly. As the brothers grew up during the Sengoku period, Michikatsu aspired to become a samurai, as the period was renowned as the era of the warring states and saw an upsurge in the number of people picking up swords as their weapon of choice. Being the preferred child, Michikatsu was allowed to have hopes and dreams, and his dreams of becoming a samurai were supported by their father. One day, as Michikatsu practiced his sword swings at the age of 7, Yoriichi smiled and declared his desire to become a samurai just like his brother. Not only was it startling because the boy who was predestined to become a monk wanted to be a samurai, but also because up until then, no one knew Yoriichi could speak. However, due to Yoriichi's determined destiny, Michikatsu dismissed Yoriichi's desire. One of their father's men, however, decided to show Yoriichi a simple stance to humor him. To everyone's surprise, not only was Yoriichi able to assume the stance instantly, but he landed 4 blows against the man. The same man whom Michikatsu had yet to land a single blow on despite his relentless training. This startled Michikatsu as he realized how his brother had far more natural talent than he. Yoriichi, however, had a gentle nature and hated the feeling of hitting a person, which led to him claiming that he didn't wish to be a samurai anymore. Eventually, Michikatsu questioned Yoriichi on how he had managed to land a blow on the man, to which Yoriichi responded that before striking, he had taken a deep breath and analyzed his internal physical state, examining his muscle movements down to the most delicate nerves and the flow of blood within them as he took the stance. This would later become the basis for the breathing techniques used by the demon slayers, but back then that wasn't a thing. Having recognized his natural talent, Michikatsu believed that it was foolish of Yoriichi to denounce violence, and yet feared that their lives might be swapped if their father realized that Yoriichi was the one who possessed greater natural talent. At some point, the illness that plagued their mother claimed her life. Yoriichi visited Michikatsu in his room that day to share the news as he bid his twin farewell to depart for the temple to live as a monk. He expressed his gratitude and even took the untuned flute he was gifted with, claiming that he would always keep Michikatsu in his mind before he left. Later, as Michikatsu went through their mother's diary, he learned about Akeno's illness and realized that Yoriichi was able to see through their mother, which is why he would cling to her, not because he was a pathetic little boy in need of his mother, but because he was supporting the weakened left side of her body and helping her move. Yoriichi also knew that his talent would lead to their father making him the heir and sending Michikatsu to the temple instead. To save his twin from such a grim fate, especially because he so desperately wanted to be a samurai, Yoriichi left before turning 10 to spare Michikatsu. This was a tremendous act of kindness, but with the realization that not only was Yoriichi selfless, but also a genius far beyond his caliber, Michikatsu developed a tremendous sense of envy and hatred towards his twin. Meanwhile, Yoriichi practically ran from the house and never looked back. How did Yoriichi become a demon slayer? Yoriichi ran for an entire day and an entire night into the mountains without slowing down, his body powered by his natural physical prowess. Soon, he met a girl named Uda who was approximately the same age as him. Her family had died and she had become an orphan. With both Yoriichi and Uda being all alone, the two began to live together. 10 years later, they got married, and eventually Uda was pregnant. On the day she was expected to have the baby, Yoriichi left to find a midwife for her delivery and promised Uda that he would be back before the sun set. However, Yoriichi's selfless nature led to his downfall when he lost time in order to help an old man. He lost so much time doing so and decided to go back home and leave again the next day to summon the midwife. However, he was already too late and the sun had set. By the time he reached home, he found Uda and their unborn child dead, as their lives had been taken by a demon. Shocked and devastated by the tragedy, he held Uda's corpse in his arms for 10 days straight until he met a demon slayer who encouraged him to bury them. Previously, he had denounced violence despite his natural talents, but this time, not only had he been personally traumatized by demons, but he also had nothing left to live for. Meeting the demon slayer finally encouraged Yoriichi to pick up his blade once again as he went on to train in the art of demon slaying. The art of the sun-breathing style. With Yoriichi's physical prowess and natural talent for swordsmanship, nothing could stop him from becoming an incredibly powerful demon slayer. With the technique he had described to Michikatsu about analyzing internal organs to the T and the breath he took before a stance, Yoriichi became the first person to create a breathing technique that could amplify a person's powers. As such, he developed the sun-breathing technique and became the most powerful demon slayer in history. He was also aided by his odd birthmark, which went on to be known as the Demon Slayer mark, a mark that made a demon slayer much more powerful. The interesting thing about this mark was its ability to resonate with others. If another demon slayer found themselves in an agitated state, either amidst battle or in general, where their heart rate crossed 200 beats per minute and their body temperature touched 39 degrees Celsius, being in the presence of someone with a permanent demon slayer mark allowed them to acquire a demon slayer mark as well. With his breathing technique and battle prowess, Yoriichi tried to teach the sun-breathing style to the others, which nobody ever got the hang of. So Yoriichi developed other styles, such as the wind, water, thunder, flame, and stone-breathing techniques, based on the natural abilities and inclinations of his peers. Unlike him, however, when the other demon slayers who possess breathing styles awakened their demon slayer marks, they didn't acquire a permanent mark. Instead, their marks appeared when they were agitated and then disappeared. It could be reactivated later based on their temperament and battle-driven environment. This is due to the fact that only Sunbreathers and Yoriichi's immediate relatives can possess permanent marks. Yoriichi and Michikatsu were later reunited after Michikatsu's family was killed by a demon attack, and the latter went on to become a demon slayer after seeing how powerful Yoriichi was. Although Michikatsu could not emulate his brother's sun-breathing technique, he went on to create the moon-breathing technique and awakened a permanent demon slayer mark. During the events of the story, we learn about Tanjiro and his father Tanjiro being able to perform the sun-breathing style, or Hinokami Kagura, and that both father and son possessed a permanent mark. What made Yoriichi different, however, was the fact that he was born with the mark. Despite the presence of other breathing styles such as Michikatsu's very powerful moon breathing, or the other elemental styles and their subsets such as water breathing, flower breathing, thunder breathing, sound breathing, insect breathing, and so on, none of the styles were as powerful as sun breathing, precisely due to the fact that the sun was a demon's greatest weakness. This allowed Yoriichi to take down demons effortlessly, and his attacks had the ability to dampen a demon's regeneration abilities. As a whole, there are 13 forms of sun breathing. The first 12 are generally performed in standard battles, and we'll get to the 13th form in an upcoming segment. Do check out our video on Tanjiro as we go into deep detail on all the forms of the sun-breathing style. With that being said, let's get back to Yoriichi. Although Yoriichi always remained unrivaled in his swordsmanship, his sun-breathing basically sealed the deal for him. He eventually battled Muzan, but despite almost winning, he failed to kill the Demon King, following which he was banished from the Demon Slayer Corps without a single person having inherited his fantastic technique. So how did the technique fall into the hands of the Kamados? A charcoal merchant named Sumiyoshi Kamado had moved into an abandoned house with his wife, Suyako. This was the same house as the one Yoriichi and Uda used to live in. Suyako eventually became pregnant, but the Kamados almost lost their chance at a happy future during the final month of her pregnancy when they experienced a demon attack, almost causing them to fall prey to the same tragedy as Yoriichi. However, they were saved by Yoriichi himself, who struck down the demon and rescued them. The Kamados were eternally grateful to the Demon Slayer and created the foundation for Yoriichi growing close to the family. The Kamados also had another child later, and Yoriichi visited their house. As he went on to visit them more, Suyako would request that he perform the forms of the sun-breathing technique. Witnessing Yoriichi in all his glory, Sumiyoshi burned the forms in his memories and became the first person to emulate the sun-breathing technique. In his case, however, he adopted it while the technique was being performed not for battle, but as an art, which gave rise to Sumiyoshi creating the Hinokami Kagura, or the Dance of the Fire God, which became something the Kamados would perform till dawn at the yearly Shrine Festival. The Hinokami Kagura was passed down from generation to generation, and Tanjiro eventually learned the technique from his father as he listened to his father's words and witnessed him perform the dance. With the sun-breathing technique, Yoriichi also handed over the Hanafuda earrings to Sumiyoshi, which were then passed down to his descendants. Eventually, Yoriichi's reputation led to the creation of a battle doll named Yoriichi Type 0, which Tanjiro trained with during the Swordsmith Village arc. The doll had 6 arms holding 1 katana each, as it seemed impossible to create a doll with 2 arms to emulate Yoriichi's swordsmanship, precisely because Yoriichi moved so fast that the eye couldn't process it, and such a feat required the doll to have 6 arms to emulate it. The battle doll was also made to possess 108 techniques to make the attacks resemble a fraction of what Yoriichi's 13 forms of sun-breathing could perform, and yet the doll always remained vastly inferior in comparison to the real deal. Yoriichi's versatile skill set. What sets him apart and how? Powered by his sun-breathing, Demon Slayer mark, and the ability to see through living beings, it's obvious that Yoriichi has reached the selfless state necessary to access the transparent world. This was evident in his body language as he showed no signs of having a fighting spirit, the one thing Tanjiro had to discard to unlock his selfless state in his fight against Akaza. The transparent world Yoriichi had access to would allow him to see through his opponent's lung expansions and how even their smallest muscles moved, allowing him to find Muzan's vitals in an instant, whereas in the Taisho era, where the events of the main story are set, it took the Hashiras quite some time to figure this out. His selfless state also prevented Muzan from detecting him, as he had no spirit, no bloodlust, no anger, and nothing to sense from the progenitor of breathing techniques. This ensured that the Demon King would fail to predict Yoriichi's moves or even gauge his strength properly. Yoriichi was also the first person to ever turn his Nichiren sword bright red, for which the aforementioned qualities were necessary. The bright red Nichiren sword was far more effective against demons than the standard sword, and regardless of breathing techniques, it could hinder a demon's regeneration. With Yoriichi's sword having left long-lasting scars on Muzan himself, combined with the sun breathing, it had burned the Demon King on a cellular level. In conclusion, while the red Nichiren sword of other demon slayers could slow down a demon's regeneration, Yoriichi could nearly negate Muzan's instantaneous regeneration, making his swordsmanship comparable to the powers of the sun. In terms of strength, stamina, endurance, and speed, Yoriichi was once again unrivaled. He was stronger than every demon slayer ever when it came to strength, evident from when he created severe and big bruises on the first man he had fought using only a wooden sword at the age of 7 when he declared that he wanted to be a samurai. We've already spoken of how the Yoriichi Type 0 needed 6 arms to emulate a fraction of his speed, considering how he could blitz through the strongest of opponents, be it the demon version of his own brother Kokushibo or the Demon King himself. Not much has to be said about his stamina and endurance either, as he had run for an entire day without slowing down the night he departed from the Tsugikuni household. He had also survived despite not having eat or drinking water for 10 days straight when Uda and their unborn child were killed by a demon. Yoriichi was also able to outlive the curse of his birthmark, which, according to superstition, should not have allowed him to live past the age of 25. However, Yoriichi lived until he was 85, without experiencing even a slight decline in his abilities. His having created several breathing styles to suit the individual needs of each demon slayer and tapping into the transparent world as a child would be a great testament to his genius intellect. In fact, it was his creation of the breathing styles that ushered the world into the golden age of demon slayers. And finally, we cannot address the abilities of demon slayers without talking about their extrasensory perception, as we've been made aware of Tanjiro's keen sense of smell from the very beginning of the story. Similarly, Yoriichi also possessed extraordinary sensory abilities, even without having to tap into the transparent world. He could detect the aura of demons, differentiate between humans and demons from that alone, and even gauge the strength of his enemies from the very beginning. Yoriichi versus Muzan, the one-sided battle between the strongest demon and the strongest demon slayer. It only makes sense for a man as powerful as Yoriichi to one day challenge Muzan Kibutsuji. At that time, Muzan was being accompanied by Tameo, who was yet to cut off the control Muzan had over her as she possessed his blood just like every other demon. However, Yoriichi never sought Muzan out like that. He simply encountered him, and with his extrasensory perception, he could immediately feel his disgustingly malicious intent. He equated his aura to boiling magma pouring out of an erupted volcano, which threatened to destroy everything in its way. It was at this point that Yoriichi realized why he was born with the talent he always had. It was his destiny from birth to kill Muzan, who, by that time, had lost interest in swordsmen who used breathing techniques. What he didn't know was that Yoriichi wasn't just any swordsman, and Muzan underestimating him would become a fault he would regret forever. Muzan attacked Yoriichi with long sweeps of his arms. While Yoriichi was able to dodge them due to his immaculate speed, he also quickly realized that if even one of Muzan's attacks landed on him, he would die, making this the first time Yoriichi ever feared his own death. He soon tapped into the transparent world and realized that Muzan, whose blood demon art was manipulating his own flesh to a whole new level, possessed 5 brains and 7 hearts. This meant that the Demon King had 12 vital spots that had to be taken out, but Muzan also possessed nigh instant regeneration, which meant that Yoriichi could not take out one vital and then go for another. He had to attack all of them simultaneously. As such, he combined all 12 forms of his sun breathing and created the final 13th form, which went after all of Muzan's attacks at once and overpowered him with little difficulty. As we've mentioned before, due to Yoriichi's selfless state, Muzan had failed to gauge his power and predict his next attacks. The damage he had taken from Yoriichi's attack left him dumbfounded, and he struggled to keep his nearly severed head attached. Before Yoriichi could finish him off, Muzan manipulated his flesh to make his body burst into 1,800 bits. Yoriichi instantly took out 1,500 of them with his bright red Nichirin, negating Muzan's regeneration completely as it burned him on a cellular level. However, 300 bits of his flesh had survived, which allowed Muzan to eventually regenerate over time and keep his life. Ultimately, Yoriichi failed to kill the Demon King, despite being superior in battle. This and the fact that his brother Michikatsu had turned into a demon named Kokushibo led to Yoriichi being banished by the Demon Slayer Corps, and he eventually hunted down demons individually. Meanwhile, Muzan stayed fearful of that encounter for the rest of his life. Following Yoriichi's death from age, he and Kokushibo killed everyone who had inherited the sun-breathing technique, almost making it a lost art. In the Taisho period, he attacked the Komodo family, not to kill them but to inject them with a strong dose of his blood, hoping to turn them into demons. He believed that their connection to Yoriichi's sun-breathing would help create a demon who could conquer sunrise, but, barring Nezuko, no one could handle such a lethal dose of Muzan's blood and perished. Meanwhile, Nezuko did manage to overcome her weakness to sunlight. As the events of the story kicked off and Tanjiro became a demon slayer, Muzan took special interest in him because he wore the same Hanafuda earrings as Yoriichi and would often send demons to take him out for the same reason. When Tanjiro used his sun breathing against Daki, she could feel Muzan's cells shivering in fear within her, as it was Yoriichi's sun breathing that had mentally scarred him. In the final arc, he did eventually fight Tanjiro, who had witnessed the true form of the sun breathing technique from Yoriichi in his memories. He learned from the progenitor to remove all the drawbacks from his moves and unleashed his attack on Muzan, who had been weakened by a drug created by Tameo and Shinobu. Despite the drug having caused Muzan to age rapidly to make him weaker, the Demon King mentioned how Tanjiro's sun breathing was nothing in comparison to Yoriichi's, who had managed to overpower Muzan without the latter having to be weakened using drugs. Something similar occurred during the Swordsmith Village arc when Nezuko, using her blood demon art Explosive Blood, laced Tanjiro's Nichiren sword with her blood and lit the blade on fire. This was witnessed by Hantengu's forms, Sekido, Urogi, and Karoku, who quickly stopped in their tracks after seeing the blade, as Muzan's blood within them trembled with fear. Sakito witnessed Muzan's memories in his blood and realized how the flaming sword was reminiscent of the one that had nearly killed the Demon King. After Muzan had to flee from Yoriichi, no Demon Slayer was ever able to bring him to the verge of death. In fact, for the longest time, even the strongest Demon Slayers failed to even defeat the upper-ranked demons, let alone Muzan himself. The death of Yoriichi and its impact on the life of Kokushibo. Michikatsu embraced Yumiko because Yoriichi was his brother. He was desperate to rival and surpass him, but not only did he not have the natural talent to do so, but he couldn't even emulate the sun breathing and had to settle for the comparatively inferior moon breathing technique. Things hit the ceiling when Michikatsu awakened his Demon Slayer mark, and he began to fear for his life as he believed that he would die before the age of 25, and, as a result, he would die before ever catching up to his twin, whose strength he envied so much. Naturally, when he met Muzan, he accepted the Demon King's proposal, believing that he would be stronger than Yoriichi as a demon since he would possess the innate strength of demons, regeneration, and an ageless body. He would even outlive the curse by centuries. With his breathing technique, he went on to become the upper rank one known as Kokushibo, making him the strongest demon under Muzan. However, if Muzan was no match for Yoriichi, Kokushibo could never compare to his brother even with his new body. One day, Kokushibo even met Yoriichi several days later. The genius twin had outlived the curse as well, staying alive until the age of 85 in his human body. Yoriichi found it sad how Kokushibo had fallen for the sake of strength. He cried for his brother and decided that he had to strike him down. The two eventually fought, and despite Yoriichi's age, he quickly gained the upper hand over the upper rank one with a single move, slitting Kokushibo's throat at once. However, before he could sever the head with a blow, Yoriichi died standing, and that too from natural causes. Kokushibo knew that the second blow would have killed him, but instead witnessed Yoriichi dying naturally from old age, having outlived the curse and easily overpowered his demonic form even at the age of 85. Enraged, Kokushibo attacked his brother's now dead body, only to find out that Yoriichi carried the untuned flute he had gotten from Michikatsu when they were kids, the very flute he had promised to keep for the sake of his brother's memory on the day he left the Tsugikuni household to spare Michikatsu from the same fate that Yoriichi had been subjected to. Centuries later, as Kokushibo fought Genya, Gyome, Sanemi, and Muichiro, the combined attack from the three Hashiras and the demon-eating human led to Kokushibo being beheaded. Reluctant to die fair and square even after the killing blow, the upper rank one regenerated his head and acquired a monstrous form. However, he was shocked to see his horrific reflection in Sanemi's blade, and soon found himself in a state of limbo, having a dialogue with Yoriichi, who chided him for letting go of his humanity and becoming a monster. He saw how honorable and peaceful Yoriichi looked, with honor being crucial to the soul of a samurai. He realized that he had dreamed of being a samurai too, and while he was a monster, his brother, whom he was so envious of, was what a true samurai should look like. This sent Kokushibo into an identity crisis, and his flesh eventually disintegrated. Marvelous verdict! Yoriichi, being unparalleled in strength, has always been teased within the story, even when we barely had any context for it. Daki's very cells feared sun-breathing. Tanjiro battled with a training robot who boasted red hair, Hanafuda earrings, and a forehead mark just like him, but the character was shrouded in mystery for the longest time. It would be safe to say that the reveal about his strength, soul, and the trajectory of his life has been more than worth it. With that, today's video comes to an end. Did you like? Share all of your thoughts with us in the comments down below, and until next time, thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and have a marvelous day.